this episode of Charged and Disbarred.
I believe in the rules of ethics and that lawyers are very powerful people who have an obligation to society. Clearly, he was stealing money.
Lawrence Burns basically helped my ex-spouse criminally charge me with false allegations that could have ended my life and career.
Judges and attorneys are like kings and knights in their own realm. It is unthinkable that in a moment of madness they can all be thrown away. Charged and Disbarred explores the true life stories of attorneys who have fallen from grace. Hear firsthand accounts from the victims, detectives, and prosecutors who brought these disgraced attorneys to justice. This is Charged and Disbarred.
I think that attorneys are charged with a lot of responsibility, and that is why I take the rules of ethics so seriously. When an attorney is dishonest, I just can have them tarred and feathered and drawn and quartered.
Savannah, Georgia, a venerable community in the American South, steeped in history and tradition dating back to the British colonies. With cobblestone streets, Victorian buildings, and lush vegetation, Savannah's charming original city is one of the largest national historic districts in America. Today, it remains an important southern center of industry, culture, and commerce. Savannah is where Georgia attorney Donald Carlton Gibson chose to make his home with his wife and family. The prettiest house on the block, the two-story Victorian, stands out in the modest neighborhood and backs up to the mighty fortress, an imposing Southern Baptist church. However, Savannah is not where Gibson chose to practice law. Though he had a few clients in Savannah, his law offices were some 80 miles to the south in the Glynn County seat of Brunswick, located much closer to Jekyll Island than to Hilton.
When he first started practicing law, he hung out his own shingle. He didn't come from any law firm, and he and I were professional colleagues. When he started, I gave him all of my forms, which is a humongous resource. He and I were opposing counsel, maybe even co-counsel once or twice over the 10, 15 years that he practiced law. So I knew him quite well, but solely on a professional basis.
Gibson earned his law degree in 1999 from the Walter F. George School of Law at the prestigious Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. That same year, he was admitted to the Georgia State Bar.
Mr. Gibson always had a very good reputation as a trial lawyer. He was an effective trial lawyer. He represented his clients in court quite well. As most lawyers, he won about half his cases and lost about half the cases, but that's pretty common for most lawyers. But he was very well respected and a very sharp dresser. He liked bow ties.
Midway between Savannah and Atlanta, Brunswick is home to the third busiest shipping port in the United States and a federal law enforcement training center. It was here in Brunswick where Carlton Gibson set up his law offices and did most of his business.
When I first met Carlton Gibson, he was referred to me to be an attorney that I needed on a short notice basis in order to represent me in a federal court case dealing with a property dispute ownership. At that time, my impression was he was intelligent, smart guy, and very likable.
Gibson's practice flourished, but as a solo practitioner, he had little oversight from other attorneys. His clients included small business owners, the Glynn County School Board, and a few Savannah concert venues. In 2005, Gibson received the H. Sol Clark Award, which honors an individual lawyer who extends legal services to the poor. Gibson received the award for his work with the local Georgia Legal Services Program, a free legal aid project for which he handled over 80 cases during a 5-year period. But Gibson had a secret.
Mr. Gibson's criminal behavior came to light when another attorney walked into my office and showed me the check where he had forged his name over mine as payee of an $80,000 check. I began to suspect that something was awry with the $80,000 settlement check when Mr. Gibson emailed me several times saying that his client had to move funds around before she could liquidate the $80,000. It didn't sound very believable to me, but I had no reason not to believe it.
FBI Special Agent Jeffrey H. Roberts would later testify at the federal sentencing hearing that Gibson had altered the settlement check from his own client to Sowerby, who was to relay the money to his client. On October 7, 2014, Gibson inserted his own firm's operating account as the payee and deposited the check. This is known as theft by conversion. The obvious forgery would not have fooled the human bank teller, but the check was deposited electronically. Gibson had committed bank fraud, but this time he had gotten caught.
I believe in the rules of ethics and that lawyers are very powerful people who have an obligation to society. My first reaction was to take the case to our local district attorney, Jackie Johnson, and show it to her and let her decide whether any criminal conduct had occurred and if so to prosecute. That same day, I filed a grievance with the State Bar of Georgia against Mr. Gibson, suggesting that an emergency suspension of his license to practice law was in order because clearly he was stealing money. And that's one thing lawyers cannot do.
It is unknown exactly when Gibson's ethical standards began to slide. But this wasn't the first time Gibson had cashed a check for his client and pocketed the money for himself. Investigators found a trail of unhappy clients, some dating back as far as 10 years. Gibson had stolen money, failed to perform legal services for which his clients had already paid, and robbed trust accounts. His victims included some of the most vulnerable people in the community: retirees on fixed income, non-English speakers, and at least one elderly widow.
Because I had no clue that he had done anything other than my one $80,000 check. I began to learn about it when other people started calling me, most specifically Detective Roy Blackstock with the City of Brunswick Police Department, asking me questions.
Investigators discovered that Gibson had taken at least $312,000 from 10 clients over a 4-year period starting in September of 2010. Among his victims were the Hospice of Golden Isles, the Glynn County Board of Education, and store owner David Patel. Edward Kennedy, a retired Army major who was awarded the Purple Heart, also fell victim to Gibson's bad lawyering.
When I was told that Carlton Gibson had been arrested and had been accused of certain things, and I was informed also that he had taken a lot of money from me, I was very hurt. I put a lot of trust in the man. He violated every rule that I could ever think of, every ethic of an attorney, and it hurt me. I felt I had been very betrayed.
I was good to him. We treated each other well professionally, and for him to lie to me as blatantly as he did just confirmed something that I had already known, which was over the course of 10, 15 years, whatever it is, that we were opposing counsel. On a couple of occasions, he pulled some stunts that were just downright dirty. Not illegal, not unethical, just dirty and underhanded.
I paid him over $50,000 in attorney fees from nothing. I lost $22,000 from nothing. It was supposed to be returned to me. We sent a check to him. He cashed the check and he kept the money. I had another check that he received for about $1,800, and he cashed that, overprinted a check, and he cashed that one.
David Patel owned a local convenience store. He hired Gibson on many occasions going back 10 years. Gibson took money on his behalf and kept it for himself. Patel claims that Gibson always had official-looking documents to explain why the money was not coming back to him. Patel had referred Gibson to friends and family members. They too lost money. Gibson even continued to cause problems and losses for his clients after he was caught. He abandoned his law practice in jail. Instead of turning his caseload over to another lawyer, he let deadlines expire and filings go unanswered.
I lost another case because he was in jail and he could not respond to the request for summary judgment. So the court said, well, you were notified that he was in jail. I really wasn't notified, but he was notified, and so I lost a $70,000 judgment. Figure everything up, close to $500,000. Everything that I have saved for 30-something years. Because he took money from me, he took money from some other folks too, that were much older than I am, and I'm an old man myself. So he took some money from another person with quite a bit of money, her retirement fund. He took some money from retirement home, and many other things. We just don't know how much he took.
The federal prosecutor filed a formal accusation for a single count of felony bank fraud based on Gibson's plea bargain. On December 15th, 2015, Gibson pled guilty. Was this remorse or to satisfy the plea bargain he couldn't afford to pass up? Whatever the case, Gibson spared himself and his family the grief of a grand jury investigation and trial. In a strange twist of fate, Gibson's sentencing hearing was before federal judge Lisa Wood, in the very same courtroom he had argued his first case many years earlier. Gibson noted this when he confessed to the court. Instead of that man full of promise, I'm here to be judged for what I am. I'm a thief. The prosecutor in the case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer G. Solari, suggested that Gibson was not remorseful. She told the court that Gibson had briefly attended alcohol rehab to get some charges dismissed, but had gone back to his old ways. She also revealed Gibson's admission that he stole all the money and spent it on what he called stupid stuff.
He has ruined the lives of a lot of people, and he should be held to the same standards that I would be held to if I stole from you, which they'd put me in jail for 10 years. And everybody said, well, he pled guilty, so he acknowledged his guilt. Well, he didn't acknowledge it until after he was caught. So I don't think he has any remorse, no. And the judgment, as far as I'm concerned, was a slap on the wrist. I think he got 42 months for this. So he'll be out in less than 3 years. I would imagine he'll get a third off of good behavior, so he'll be out in 2 years.
Judge Lisa Wood sentenced him to the high end of the recommended federal sentencing guidelines. Justice has been served in that the criminal has been convicted and he is doing his time in prison, and there is an order requiring him to pay his victims when he gets out. My opinion of Carlton Gibson and what he deserves is a lot harsher than what the law allows.
Gibson was ordered to pay restitution to his victims in the amount of $312,432.19.
The judge said that I would get about $100 a month for the rest of my life. Well, I'll be dead before I collect $1,000, you know. But that's just the way life is, I guess.
Kennedy and several other victims, including Sowerby as fiduciary for his client, have also filed lawsuits against Gibson.
There will be 4 court orders requiring Mr. Gibson to pay money when he gets out of prison. Now, like any other court order, it's just a piece of paper. If you can't turn it into cash, you may as well frame it and hang it on the wall for all the good it'll do you. Part of his plea agreement was to surrender his license to practice law, which he did. Possibility of Mr. Gibson ever practicing law again is slim to none. In fact, it is absolutely non-existent unless some state bar totally drops the ball on their investigation of him. Or he assumes a new identity.
The penalty is not just. It should have been much more from my perspective. And it still is.
Up next, meet the businessman whose life became a waking nightmare of false allegations, arrest, and jail, all because of a Toronto attorney's crony scheme.
Lawrence Burns basically helped my ex-spouse criminally charge me with false allegations that could have ended my life and career.
This is Charged and Disbarred.
If Carlton Gibson was a coyote, a scavenger, Toronto attorney Lawrence Burns was a wolf. Where Gibson used his dirty tricks to hide his own weakness and misdeeds, Burns used the legal system to cripple his opponents. Toronto is the largest city in Canada and the 4th largest metropolitan area in all of North America. It is culturally diverse, cosmopolitan, and prosperous. Many multinational corporations locate their headquarters in Toronto, making it a commercial hub for Canada. John Lawrence Burns was admitted to the Law Society of Canada in 1976. He kept offices at 75 Lowther Avenue in a quaint 19th century brick and stone house in the Annex neighborhood of Toronto.
I see a lot of fraud going on with lawyers in Canada, especially in my business where I deal with commercial financing and financing mortgage deals. They're always wanting to get kickbacks. They always want to get fees under the table.
But Robert Bukowski's encounter with Lawrence Burns would rise to a whole new level of deceit.
Lawrence Burns affected me in many ways, emotionally, personally, and my family.
Bukowski ran a nightclub he had received through a bankruptcy proceeding. In 1998, he started dating one of the staff who became the manager of the club. A year later, the couple had a son together and bought a house. At some point, Bukowski says she had begun using illicit drugs.
So 2002 is basically when it really started. I came home one day and I found that she was in the right state of mind, and I was concerned that this is not going to be conducive to the family lifestyle or raising my son. So I basically said to her that I hope somebody blows up that bar, which had a contest in sheer madness I was joking about. I said to her, "Don't worry, I will take care of you." But I meant in a financial aspect, because I really wanted to break the relationship up. In her state of mind at that time, which was altered by illicit drugs and alcohol, she misconstrued that. She called the police and had them falsely charge me with threatening death and threatening to blow up a building. And I truly explained to the police officers that's not what I intended to say or anything like this. And they had no proof of it, this whatsoever.
Bukowski was arrested, charged, and locked up.
Joe was immediately processed and sent to the main holding super jail in Toronto for violent offenders, which was unbelievable, and unbelievable to my mother and my brother and my whole family. They were just totally shocked. How could this happen? Well-rounded, educated son of theirs is in prison, basically. And it was my first experience at this, and it was a terrible experience. I spent 1 week in there.
As soon as he was released on bail, Bukowski contacted a friend who was a corporate litigation attorney. His friend advised him to move in with his mother and to avoid any contact with his estranged spouse, which Bukowski did.
Lawrence Burns showed up on the scene with my ex-spouse. It was basically, seems to me like Mr. Lawrence Burns was mentoring the girlfriend's spouse. Within another week, she managed to call the police again and charged me with numerous counts of threatening death again against her, which again, I was rearrested again for breach of bail and put back in the same facility.
Bukowski claims he never spoke to her or violated the terms of his release. He says the allegations were completely made up. His first incarceration in the super jail had been uneventful. This time was different. The night before Bukowski was to appear before the judge, he was violently assaulted by another inmate who claimed to know him.
He just goes, right there, like I'm sitting here, he goes, wham, 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 wham. And I'm actually like 50 pounds heavier than this guy, right? So then I spit out my lip, basically. I went to court the next morning, and I'm in shackles, ankles and feet, and hands and chains, in orange jumpsuit, with a bruised face, cut lip, and wondering what the judge is going to think. What type of individual am I? You know, am I a violent offender? Because obviously I have the bruises to show that I had an altercation in the prison system. And my mother was appalled, crying, and even my mother-in-law from the first wife was there to defend me, how great I was and all this stuff, right? Crown attorney at the time, who was a young lawyer, you know, no fault of her own, inexperienced, was taking the advice from Lawrence Burns that I was even a sexual offender, that I was a rapist, that I raped my spouse's ex-girlfriend, that I forced myself on her sexually, that I sodomized her, that I beat her into submission to have sex with me. The Crown attorney wanted me to stay in prison. Well, thank God, with my criminal lawyer and the judge, they didn't see it that way. They started to see that I was becoming a victim of a plot to extort me of my business and my property and my son, especially my son. He did release me, but this time he released me on a $500,000 bond for false allegations of threatening death or threatening to blow up a property, which is unbelievable.
Now that Bukowski was out of jail, the long legal battle to clear his name and get his life back had just begun.
My lawyer and myself commenced a legal action against my ex-spouse, not only to obtain control back of my business, but also to obtain full custody of my son. Mr. Lawrence Burns represented my ex-spouse, which consistently adjourned trials, adjourned court proceedings in order to frustrate my situation, thinking that I would outspend myself in legal fees against obtaining a court judgment. I found out through sources that she kept on dabbling more and more into illicit drugs and alcohol, and my son was at risk. My lawyer, Mr. George Callahan, had always the impression, through all the documents and disclosures, that Lawrence Burns might have had a relationship more than a business relationship with my girlfriend, ex-spouse. I heard from numerous sources that he was partying at the nightclub with the ex-spouse girlfriend till wee hours in the morning, and that's not what a lawyer does. I don't know what the fascination was to hang in there knowing that he wasn't getting paid by the ex-girlfriend's spouse for so long and keep on going to trials and adjournments, setting adjournments and setting up trials and never showing up and just frustrating my lawyer. So I think they were just trying to frustrate me to the point where I would not be able to financially pay my lawyers or just quit the whole process. I found it appalling that they treated me like a criminal, but yet the real criminal was the officer of the court.
Bukowski would work tirelessly for years to help his lawyers clear his name. He hired private investigators, consultants, and he learned to act within the legal system on his own to support the paid and pro bono work of his attorneys.
With charges of criminal allegations, immediately your real estate license is revoked, your mortgage license is revoked, and I was taking odd jobs part-time, living at my mother's house, making minimum wage in factories at the age of 42 years of age. So I was really in a down spiral. I entered a rehab facility because at that time I was starting to drink too much because of the stress. I did everything the court asked. And in 2004, finally, after many, many attempts in the court, I finally was able to obtain full custody for my son and managed to have all false allegations dismissed by court order as they were done under false pretenses. The judge told me to stay away from this woman and stay away from this woman's lawyer because they're very dangerous. And for your sake, you don't want to be put in this situation ever again.
But the damage was already done.
But at that time, there was no time to save the business because it was gone into bankruptcy already because all the money was extorted by my ex-spouse. The court decided that I would receive half the asset of the home that we purchased together, which was a sum of $100,000.
Getting Burns and his ex-spouse to pay the $100,000 proved to be yet another legal challenge.
Mr. Burns was ordered by court order to pay the funds into court, at which time he accepted and he was going to do. That transpired in 2008, after 4 years of legal battles.
Burns submitted the check to the court, and Bukowski felt he had finally resolved the matter. He would use the proceeds from his house to buy a hotel business in small-town Chatham, Ontario. He planned to move his new wife and family out of the city into a more family-friendly environment. But in December of 2007, Bukowski got more bad news.
I find out that the check that Mr. Burns wrote to the court for $100,000 went NSF, which means it bounced, which is unheard of when a lawyer writes a check to the federal government, to the court system, to bounce a check. Basically, I just fell to the floor, completely lost, in distress. Mr. Burns created a chain of events where the repercussions of this were going to be astronomical, because the following week I would be facing a closing of a transaction of $4 million. A real estate transaction on the hotel I purchased, and that $100,000 was part of a down payment. I ended up coming back to Toronto and having to borrow $100,000 from other private sources at horrendous amounts of fees and interest rates to close this hotel transaction, which finally it did close.
When Bukowski and his attorney began the legal process of recovering the $100,000 through the Law Society of Canada, they discovered others had also made claims against Lawrence Burns. Unfortunately, recovery of money for people who had fallen victim to Burns was first come, first served.
I was contacted by the Toronto Star years later, and I found out that there was many victims of the same scenario from Mr. Lawrence Burns, and that he had embezzled approximately close to $1 million. They reported $500,000, but I understand it's over $1 million in funds. Yes, he did get disbarred, but in a situation like this, he should be criminally accountable for his actions completely.
An investigation by the Toronto Star found that fewer than 1 in 5 attorneys who stole money from their clients were criminally charged in Ontario, though law societies in other parts of Canada do report crimes to the police. The investigation also found that $61 million had been stolen, diverted, or defrauded from client trust funds.
Lawrence Burns' crime is misappropriating funds and fraud. Fraud against elderly people, fraud against myself. I understand one woman lost $300,000 that he stole from an elderly woman. And they don't have the power or the strength to go through court systems or even to fight against the Law Society, against Mr. Burns. So I took it upon myself to do the fight for them. I believe I was a target for Lawrence Burns because he saw the financial gain by representing my ex-spouse girlfriend. I think that he believed that he would eventually obtain control of this nightclub business, which was doing about $1.5 million a year. And I think that Mr. Burns actually used my girlfriend, thinking that he may be able to extort the business with her and obtain control of that business. And still to this day, I truly believe that, because I don't see any other way he would have been involved with her, because she didn't have the money to pay him. After everything's said and done, and after I won custody of my son, he billed her an enormous amount of $80,000, because I think that he didn't think he was going to see anything out of this anymore.
Yet Burns would not be disbarred until 2011. In a disciplinary hearing which he failed to attend, Lawrence Burns was charged with misappropriating client funds over a period of years beginning in 2004, failure to maintain proper bookkeeping, and misrepresentations to other attorneys. Burns' defense: undiagnosed depression and a minor cognitive impairment.
That's no excuse for what he did. Absolutely not. He's making that as an excuse, but obviously he had no medical evidence of that.
Burns lost his license and was ordered to pay over $92,000 to the compensation fund. He was also fined $20,000 payable to the Law Society within 12 months, or the fine would accumulate interest. No such interest for his victims is mentioned in the order.
The legal system in Canada seems to have two sets of laws. It seems to favor the upper echelon people who commit fraud, whether it be politicians, lawyers, or anybody of any stature in the community. Yet, if it was a average person who works in a factory, who bounced a check for $10,000, you can be sure that that person will face criminal charges. Lawrence Burns will never pay a dime back. He's got himself sheltered with his wife holding all the assets. I see him literally every day because I drive to my office to downtown Toronto. I see him going to his restaurant, and all I could do is smirk and laugh at the whole thing and move on with my life. If I would have known this was going to happen, I would have gave her the nightclub, walked away peacefully, had custody of my son, and be done with it, because family and children are the highest priority in my life.
Burns' campaign of deceit has had a lasting impact on Bukowski and the way he deals with people.
Sometimes I feared for my life from all this. The fear of being charged falsely is always on my mind. One of the key factors they kept on repeating in court, that, oh, he's 6'2", 260 pounds, and she's only 120 pounds, 5 feet tall, and things like this. It's changed my view with lawyers. I'm very skeptical of what they have to say and what they do. But one thing this has all taught me is basically through all this experience, I've become almost my own lawyer. So I go to lawyers only for the signature now. I think that greed has taken over because the standard of living is so high in certain parts of the country that to maintain that lifestyle, they have to either make the money or steal the money, and that's what I see what's happening.
Lawrence Burns cloaked himself in the robe of an honorable profession. He pretended to be of service while cheating his clients, leaving a trail of victims who feel betrayed by a system that protects its own.